everybody, and welcome to It's Getting Dicey, a podcast about all things TriStar. My name is John. I am your host for today, and I am joined by Andrew,
Hey guys.
Salvatore,
Hello.
Mikey,
What's going on?
and a little bit of a special guest, COVID Tyler. No, Dylan.
Yeah, here I am.
Emphasis on special guest.
Yeah.
So, today we have decided to talk about a game that is dear to our hearts. I'm gonna say, you'll find out. A Song of Ice and Fire, the miniatures game, which is published by Cool Mini or Not, and it's made by who is it? Dark Sword? Who makes
Dark Sword, yeah.
Yeah, Dark Sword. Yeah.
Dark Sword miniatures.
You think I would know this stuff before I go to sit down and talk about it. But anyhow, we've been playing this game for the better part of a year now. We got into it like right as they released the 2021 update. So there's 8 factions in the game. We're going to start with Baratheons. And Andrew is our resident Baratheon player. So tell us a little bit about them, and then we'll chime in and tell you why you're wrong. No, I'm just kidding. Go for it.
So, Baratheons, for those of you who do know, and those of you that don't, they are built around the whole idea of you're going to get to us first, but we're going to make you pay for it. You're looking at a faction that revolved around being able to sort of hit back against your opponent after they came into you, but it's split in half because of the split in the Baratheon house as it is in this period of the books and show. It is split between Renly and Stannis Baratheon. So you have specific units that will only work with Renly. You have specific units that will only work with Stannis. Now that they have performed some tweaks and they have put out more units, it's pretty much what I kind of thought would happen. They're sort of looking at becoming pretty powerful. I'm not going to say that they're there yet. So far, I've had 3 games with them, or 2 games, and in the last one, please check out our live stream. It's in our archive at TriStar Wargaming on YouTube. I will say I think there could have been a couple of points where the game could have really turned around against me, but it never ended up happening. So, I mean, the Baratheons performed very well in that match. So we'll see what happens as I get more games with them. But those are my overall in general thoughts about them. So what I kind of want to ask Salva specifically, like when we had that match, what did you feel like was I don't know. What were your feelings on the Baratheons and having to be across the table from them?
Usually I'm a Lannister player. That game I played with the Greyjoys. And I gotta say that even if you hit them, you will not destroy them, and they will hit you back even harder. Knowing the rules better about them, I may have done different moves and choices. But nevertheless, it is a solid army.
Interestingly, we have a Song of Ice and Fire stats pulled up, and according to just the top most used units, I think that's what an ELO rating is. The only Baratheon one on there is actually an NCU, which for those not familiar with the game is a non-combat unit. Again, go check out some of our gameplay on the channel of it. But Courtney Penrose is that NCU, and personally, I think that's one of the best NCUs in the game right now. It is just so powerful because on paper, you look at it and you say, okay, basically you pick 2 zones, and then if either of those zones are claimed that round by your opponent, then you can heal D3 plus 2 wounds. And you say, well, they may not pick those zones, but depending on how many zones have been picked, what zones you pick, how late in the round it is, what's been activated, like you can kind of force it. So I don't know, that's just some crazy healing for a 4-point NCU. First, for this particular faction, I have to ask the question: Team Renly or Team Stannis?
Honestly, right now, I really feel like Renly is the one that has the most tools in his toolbox. He just got the Thorn Watch. He is about to get the oh, it's a spear unit. I can't think of the name of it. But they've been issued out. Then of course he has access to all of the non-loyal units, the Stag Knights, the Wardens, Sentinels, Champions of the Stag. He just has more options right now. But if they continue with this thing for like the Faith units and tokens for Stannis, I can really see him coming out with a comeback. And you can really see, because there's so much synergy to what Stannis can bring. The problem is he just doesn't have. There's very few ways to capitalize on it other than individual units. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the months to come for Stannis.
I see. So Team Renly, and what is your favorite unit for the faction? And what do you think the best unit? Not necessarily best in terms of like power, but just best for the like you couldn't fathom not bringing it, I guess.
Yes. And this might actually surprise everyone. A lot of you will probably think I'm going to say Stag Knights, and I'm not going to say Stag Knights. How well the Wardens performed in that last match, they are my new favorite. They gave Salva such a hard time. The one unit he managed to actually kill took 2 of his own units to deal with. Yeah, it's going to be the Wardens. They they were a 6-point unit that just gave absolute hell.
Are they 6 or are they 5? Hold on.
It's 6. Well, sorry, 6 with the Warden.
Yeah, with the attachment.
No, I am thinking of the attachment along with them. Being able to deny the flank, rear, and charge bonuses for the first unit that comes into contact with them is just huge.
I could totally see that. That's what I thought you were going to say, honestly. That wasn't a surprise to me.
Okay.
In the interest of time, though, we have to move on because we've got 8 factions to get through. I could sit there and continue to talk about each one.
One thing is what is your general opinion on just the overall tactics deck for the Baratheons?
That's a good question.
I'll make it quick. I will make this quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
It was not great when I first picked up Baratheons, and now it also it does a much better job of synergizing with the whole idea of you are the shore on which your opponent breaks as a wave.
Cool. Yeah, definitely got better over time. And speaking of getting better over time, this is just my personal opinion. The Free Folk, that's our next topic. I think they need to get a little better. I don't know, Mikey, you're the resident savage yourself.
He has a lot to say, but
I'm sure he does. So unleash the tidal wave.
Overall, I feel like they just don't have enough anywhere. They're on the cusp at being where they need to be at so many spots. But this game, now granted, I'm not a tournament player, and I'm not a min-maxer, and I'm not saying anybody in this group is. But I feel like unless you are a min-maxer, don't even pick the Free Folk up, because it just leads to a lot of frustration. Because unless you have the ability to, maybe a chess player would have a good time with the Free Folk. I love the models, and I love the lore, and I've enjoyed painting all of my little NCUs and heroes. But overall, I think for me, the experience I've had with the Free Folk, outside of maybe the first few games when none of us knew how to play, it has just been agonizingly painful to play, because you found yourself in so many situations where nothing you try to do actually works, per se. And it's it's amazing how many times you can find yourself putting yourself into the proper spot with the hardest hitting stuff you've got. And I'm not saying go pick and fights you're not supposed to win, because, man, with the Free Folk, you're not supposed to pick any fights unless you've got a superior advantage somehow. And in most cases, I had learned to do that. But even when you do, sometimes you have to stand and fight at certain spots in the field. You can't always run. And in those spots, I have found myself devoting probably 16 points of a unit, 16 points of units, and literally 5 or 6 tactics cards, multiple turns on the NCU board to watch all 16 points of my units melt away to a 7-point unit of my opponent's. That's just it's overly punishing sometimes with the free folk. Like I said, I believe the best way to sum up playing with them is that it's like trying to juggle bills when you're a single parent. You just don't ever have enough to do what you want to do with at any aspect in the game. That's not to say they don't have good things. You know, the NCUs are great. They're a little bit one note. They don't really you've got a couple influencers. I think Steer and Egret are influencer type units, and I think they're good. Steer's overpriced in my opinion. 5 points for what he does. It makes it hard to make an even point list, which me being a little bit OCD, that bothers me. But other than that, just 5 points is a lot to give up just to make sure you get one extra attack. And I think he gives like sundering or something to whatever unit that he, yeah.
I got it pulled up here. He gives, you were right, while influencing a friendly unit, that unit's melee attacks gain +1 attack die and sundering. Yeah, I mean, that's honestly, man.
5 points, that's not really.
No,
Well, it's
that's
good,
bad for
but
5
again,
points.
It's not good enough when most of the units you've got hit so poorly already. And we don't really have, other than a couple of them, like I think the Bone Lord's Chosen, which I think is a trap unit, they have the most attacks, I think, and this is just off the head.
But
no, the Cave Dwellers are another trap unit because they die so quick that by the time you actually get to use their most attacks, they're done anyway. And I think that seems to be the thing that I think when you see people winning tournaments with Free Folk, and God bless them for fighting through the pain to get good enough to do that, they tend to be using the Free Folk Raiders a lot, which I don't understand how you win with that. But again, I'm not a tournament player. I'm speaking from like average Joe layman's terms. But it really does, I guess. Anything other than the Raiders feels like a trap unit. Like, you know, they everything they scream like, these guys are good at this, take them. But then you realize that they're just not good enough at that.
Your guy's good as everyone else's average.
Yeah, I think that sums it up pretty well.
What Dylan just said, if I may interject, because I have lost a lot of sleep over this army because of how good they apparently used to be, like when I go online and look at the forums and stuff. What Dylan just said there, they're good as everybody else's average. I think I have a theory about development-wise what happened to the Free Folk, because in the latter end of the last edition, right before we got involved, apparently they were dominating. They were number 1 right behind, dragons and that sort of thing. And I think the developers overreacted and just put the nerf hammer on them, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't that big of a deal at the start of 2021 edition because everything kind of got the nerf hammer. So everything was kind of like in that same area, sort of. But then the power creep with all the updates, changes, new units, like for instance, the Baratheons used to suck, but we just sat there and talked about how good they were now, right? And I think what happened to the Free Folk is they just got put like on the cycle of things that needed to be fixed in the developer's mind. I think they got pushed to the back because they were the first thing to get addressed in this last major overhaul. So I think it's just a power creep situation, and I know they're making changes to them in this new update, and some have been leaked, and I think they're really good. I don't want to speculate too much on them because we don't know, but I hope that gets addressed. I feel like they're almost there. They just need to be fixed. You know what I mean? Like, does that make sense? Did any of that make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree. Me and John talked about this the other day at work. They have, it's almost like the Free Folk, they have their anvils already. They just don't have any hammers, if that makes any sense. I've only played with the Free Folk, and I've played against other guys, and I've seen you guys play, and I've never seen any of you guys, in my opinion, suffer from a bad choice like the Free Folk do. And I think that's just because of their weak units and average good units. And so again, my advice to anybody, and this is where I'll wrap up, because I do love the game, is that if you are looking to join this game and you want to paint cool models and you don't want to play right now, go ahead and buy the Free Folk. But if you want to play and have a good time, you need to look elsewhere right now. That's just because they're going to be punishing, and the punishment doesn't stop until we get some type of update.
With all of that said, what are your favorite, despite like whether it be for gameplay reasons or just you like the models or like any reason in the world, what is your favorite unit / what do you think is the most reliable?
I don't actually have an answer for that. I really don't. I mean, the mammoths are cool to look at.
They
But-
suck though.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, honestly, again, I really don't know. I mean, like, I want to say the Bone Lord's Chosen, but and I guess honestly, just because I like Rattleshirt, you know, I read the books, and I know he's kind of a sniveling dude in the books, but still, yet I love the idea of the guy running around with the bone armor, as crappy as it would be. And I love the fact that the crows on the wall call him Rattleshirt instead of Lord of Bones. So, I mean, by default, I mean, the Bone Lord's Chosen would be my favorite unit. And in reality, that's just followers of Bone with an upgrade card. But I mean, yeah, but reliable? No. I mean, I guess you'd have to go with the Raiders. I mean, because it's been shown, at least in the last year, that you could put, what was it, Salva, 9 units of Raiders, all with free attachments on the field, and this guy won a tournament. I don't know how he did it. God bless him, but he did. So maybe they have to be the most reliable, you know?
Bread and butter, anyway. So segueing on to the next faction, you made a comment, and I made a noise. You said, I don't think I've ever seen somebody, when we've been playing, you know, get punished as much as with the Free Folk. And the next faction in alphabetical order is the Greyjoys, which are the newest contenders to the game. And I was the one that kind of took up their mantle. Yeah, they're pretty punishing to play. Fun? I would say they're fun. I'm not going to say they're not fun. I think they're kind of like the Free Folk, though. Maybe not quite as underpowered, but they just need some work. They're getting new units constantly. As a matter of fact, they actually just got a new NCU box, and I've yet to really play around too much with them. I think looking at their rules, they're more meant for the new releases, because we kind of keep an eye on all those different Facebook groups and stuff, and there's been a few leaks about new units they're going to get. And I think the NCUs and stuff that they just came out with make more sense with them. Man, I don't know where to start with them. They're good. On paper, they're good. You look at them, you see what they're going for, the synergies. I think they're one of the most straightforward factions in that they know what they want to be, right? Like, you don't run into the Targaryen or the Free Folk or even like the Lannister or even Baratheon problem of like, okay, well, do I choose Stannis or Renly? Or do I choose Faith or Regular? Or do I do Mercenaries or Dragons? Right? No. Greyjoy are murderous raiders that just want to slaughter everything.
Yeah.
The idea behind them is that they're supposed to be super killy. They can do a lot of damage, but then they're not going to be able to take the punishment. Like, you can take out half a Greyjoy unit in one attack. And that's fine. I actually really like that knife edge playstyle. But they just don't have the bite. They get folded like they're supposed to, but they don't have the bite. What were you gonna say, Dylan? I heard you.
I was just gonna say, on average, their best defense. They have nothing better than average defense. Like,
Oh my God.
they're great. I'm not meaning like that. I'm meaning in the sense that they are, you know, their best defense is 4. It's 4 plus
by default, yeah.
Yeah, by default.
The way it works is you have these pillage tokens, and every time you take a rank off of an enemy unit, that unit that did it gains a pillage token. Or if another unit that has the ability does it, they can basically transfer the pillage token over to another unit. Well, the problem is, I was just talking about how they don't have the bite they need. So you're not getting these pillage tokens that regularly, honestly.
Unless you're using a specific NCU, you're not really
Yeah. And they all have drawbacks, the ones that give you the pillage. They all have, like, okay, you get 2 pillage tokens, but you lose a wound every time you activate, which is a big deal. But
If I may say something,
yeah, go Salo.
the Greyjoys, they seem to be actually the ones that a lot of people looking, based on my research online, it looks like they are the ones that are winning some tournaments. They're the new kids on the block. Some people say they are one of the better designed. They're balanced.
I agree. I agree with
My
that, all those
personal
statements.
experience, yeah, my personal experience is this though. Their biggest suffering is out of the intrinsic designing of the game. And what I mean by that is this: this game, at least since the 2021, has been designed in a way where taking off a unit completely with one attack, it's very, very unlikely. The Greyjoys capitalize on taking that alpha strike. So the game itself doesn't allow them to maximize this because a lot of faction, Baratheons are probably the epitome of this, but Lannisters as well, and probably you could build Targaryens or even Starks actually to be very tanky. Not to mention the Night's Watch won't allow them to do this. So this is the thing: if you cannot take that rank off, the whole engine upon which they are built doesn't even start.
With that said, I still think they're fun. I still think they're worth playing, and they are easy to get into because, like I said, they're very XY. Like, you see the point, but you find yourself having to play very not X to Y because of everything we've talked about, at least in this current iteration of the game. But I think they're getting good with the new releases, and honestly, I have faith. I need to shut up about them, though, now that we've got most of the controversy, the factions that have seen the most change or struggle, I think, out of the way. This one has caused controversy in our group, but
Everywhere.
it seems on the internet, it seems like they're actually apparently pretty just like meh. The Lannisters.
Yeah, and that blows
Yeah.
my mind. That 100% that we've had such a different experience with these guys as what they've got online.
Yeah, Salvo's our resident lion of Casterly Rock. So yeah, me and him have a complicated history with this faction. What do you think about the Lannister, Salvo?
Well, okay. My love-hate relationship with the Lannisters started when we first decided to get into this game. They were the faction that nobody of you wanted to take, and so I said, well, they're the cheapest. They were part of the starter set, and so I said, let me give it a go. I had no other reasons other than that. I knew nothing about their background, play style, books, nothing. So if the Baratheons are the rocks, so to speak. Actually, Andrew, can you repeat it? You did it very eloquently.
They are the shore in which
Yes.
the waves break.
Great, beautiful. So the Lannisters in this, they play a game where they are not an Alpha Strike unit. They are a sort of, they're not a rock. I would say the gameplay of the Lannister is more like the water. So you can hit them, they will bend, they will take the shape, but then they will reform. So the Lannisters, I would say the word to summarize the playstyle is sustaining. They get to the objective, whatever they need to be, and they sustain. You can have some little variations here and there. You can have more an aggressive style, but where they really take their strength is not even the panic, as many people may say, oh, the panic bomb. It's not a panic bomb. It is the ability to sustain the damage, regenerate, and throwing little panics here and there, but mostly is to remain. To my experience, I played probably around maybe 30 games, maybe 40 games so far. I'm not an expert by any means, but I need to say the Lannisters, it's an army that you can rarely get tabled just because of their innate ability to sustain damage. I would say the biggest enemy of the Lannisters are a skilled opponent. Because but the truth is, if an opponent knows how to play specifically against Lannisters, they will target certain key points, and in that sense, it's easy for the army to kind of crumble, especially if you play with the poor fellows.
Yeah. And I mean, Lannisters, I definitely over time, because I've gotten my teeth kicked in so many times. My record's like 2-13 to you. But or maybe even more losses. But over time I've come to respect them because of everything you just said. It honestly, it's just they're just so I'm starting to see how people find them balanced, but I think when you know them so well as you do, and when you have such a good idea about them, they become very strong. And I think that's how a faction should be. Um, I'm coming to put the blame less on them and more just on the other factions not being as just well rounded. Like you said, they're really water. They just bend and bounce back.
Yes, the core strength of the Lannisters to me is their tactic decks. It's not even their commanders. Okay, I'm not here to tell you, oh, Tyron is the best commander. Maybe he is, or maybe Rose Bolton plays better with the Lannisters. You know, I think that's a true statement. But their true strength is their basic tactic decks, because the tactics are they work very well. They synergize beautifully with them and with some of the neutrals, such as the Bolton size. They work pretty well. And again, don't be fooled. They are not their strength is not their panic. It's not the panic, but is the ability to sustain the damage.
It depends on how you. I feel pretty comfortable saying this because, like I said, I've lost plenty of times to him. It depends on how he builds them. Like, yeah, if he goes Roose Bolton, you know, panic bomb, then yeah, I mean, it's one of the best panic bombs in the game, if not the best. But even when I play with the Greyjoys, which have about as bad a morale as the Free Folk, like, I actually didn't find myself panicking that much from them. It was more just the fact I couldn't kill him. Like,
Yeah.
it took him
Well, don't forget,
all game
though,
to kill me.
Yeah, don't forget, though, in my case, my bread and butter unit has a rule where if I fail the courage test, I actually lose an extra model. So you guys can only lose up to 3 max. I can lose more. So that's where I'm coming from. I see what you're saying, but even if he doesn't have to build a panic bomb list, he's going to make the free folk run. But I don't want to go back into the free folk. I'm just saying my opinion on the panic aspect of it. He doesn't always have to build a panic bomb to make people run.
I agree with you. No, I agree with you. But I will just say this. While with other armies, such as the Targaryens, built around panic, you could do it, especially with, I think it's the Queen of Maria or something
Yeah,
like that.
the Queen of
Marine,
Marine. Yeah.
Yes. You could. Some cards are similar, but the peculiar of the Lannister is that we use fear to heal ourselves.
Yeah.
And this is the core element. So we don't do it just to inflict damage to the enemy, but we do it to replenish our ranks.
Well, see, and that makes it that much inherently better because
Yes.
it's not just it's not like I'm hurting you. It's you are basically sucking the soul out of your opponent to revive yourself.
Correct. That's exactly what it is.
Yes.
You summarize it very nicely. They are like vampires in that sense.
Salva, you didn't mention what you think is like the best overall like unit for. Obviously, it's probably going to be the poor fellows, but
Not to me. If you ask me, my favorites are the guardsmen. I love the guardsmen because the poor fellow they're probably better in a sense of points for what you can do, but I cannot rely on them. At least, okay, I may rely on them, but I don't feel I can rely on them because I don't know. I can just place them there and expect them to survive. If the opponent knows what they're doing, then they will die. I don't like that. I prefer a unit like the Guardsmen. I mean, granted, all units can die, but the Guardsmen, I honestly, I maybe lost them maybe twice in my whole games.
But yeah, no. That was good.
all right, to the BDSM guys we go.
Yeah, the nasty boys that no one likes, even though the Mummers and the Stormcrows are thrown in there neutral. I think this one's gonna be shorter.
The Zorst Riders, I like those.
Yeah, so I think really the two guys in the group that have the most knowledge on the neutrals, or at least playtime with them, is me and Salvo for two different reasons. But I think we've built up quite the collection, when you say, Salvo, of different neutral units.
Yeah, I build mostly the Bolton side.
Yeah, and I've got both Bolton and Stormcrows for reasons you'll see later. You gonna say something, Dylan?
Well, from looking and like making a list myself, but not obviously having the models to field them, I've learned that with the neutrals, it seems like their biggest thing isn't their like on the battlefield models; it's their NCUs that are the most
Mm.
powerful for them. Like,
Yes,
yeah,
So neutrals
that,
are in a
very
unique
accurate.
position in the game in that they almost never get played as a faction themselves, like neutral faction, like you bring neutrals to the table and they kind of are not that great compared to the other factions, but then you start like piecemeal picking them
yeah,
apart and doling them out to the other factions because you're allowed to take them
yeah.
and
You
mix them in.
you
Man,
basically use what you don't have. You use a neutral to fill that void. Unless you're a free folk, there you go. I said it for you.
or
And
they don't work
I
that well in
feel
some
like
factions.
the problem is that I feel like as it using neutral units feels like cheating to me, because if I don't have that in my army myself, I should use my intelligence and game sense to get around that instead of having to just, oh, here's something that'll make my army perfect and unbeatable.
I don't feel
So,
like any of the neutrals do that though.
No, I want to say, Dylan, I see your point. I see your point,
Yeah.
and it is true that when you look at the tournament list, you see a sort of repetitive, especially in the NCU section. You see a lot of, for example, Tycho or Taicho, as you want to call it, the Iron Banker.
Peter
It is
Baelish.
yeah. Yes, that's another one. Those are sort of butter and bread for like competitive playing, and so in that sense, I do see what Dylan is saying. I think it's
Well,
it's true.
and the
It kind of
thing
makes
is,
things similar.
why on earth would I bring my 6-point Stark Bowman when I can just bring the Stormcrow archers, which are just better in every way, in my opinion.
No, I'm stopping you there. Those Stark Bowmen are
Those are amazing.
they are one of the
Well,
best ranged units in the game.
well,
They
no,
give me a
but
lot
what
of
I'm saying
issues.
is they don't have the like whole. No matter what I control, I'm doing something special to you.
All I know is that with Overwatch attachment, they hit me like 3 times in a turn.
Well, that and the fact that they just ignore intervening terrain, that
Yes,
does make them good.
it's true what you're saying, Dylan. But I want you guys to even think about this. Even if those Stormcrow archers are good and can be used, and you can say, well, why should I use my own? The point is, every neutral works, even if, for example, let's speak about the most played, the Flayed Man, okay? They're
Yeah,
number 2 of the most played unit.
that's elephant in the room.
If I play Flayed Man with Lannisters, because how they synergize with the tactics deck, I'm going to have a certain result. If I play Flayed Man with Baratheons, I'm going to have a different result. If I play them with probably with the Greyjoys, I'm going to have a different result. So even if they are the same, their play style and how much they can bring to the table is going to differ substantially. For example, between the Greyjoys and the Lannisters, my
Absolutely.
latest experience, they're gonna yes, because for example, some Greyjoys they don't even have cards that can target known Greyjoys units.
Exactly. It's kind of not really worth bringing neutrals in a Greyjoy list. They're not going to net you anything at all.
We wish kind of, I don't know if all of us do. I'm sure Andrew will be different because he's usually a 180 of somebody in the group. But if they could actually benefit, like maybe they should reward you to taking a complete neutral list instead of cherry picking. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Maybe you get a bone, like maybe your units are, some units are cheaper. Maybe you get something extra for choosing to not cherry pick what you want to shore up your list and just taking a neutral faction.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
So the cherry picking idea too, I think is only. I do agree with Dylan to an extent that it can be kind of like you end up seeing half a list, and granted, you can only take up to 50% points in neutral models, but that's usually enough. It's a problem for some factions and not at all for others. Obviously, not the free folk because they're the exception; they can't take them.
Say, I'm allowed to take 0%.
Yeah. But like Lannisters, for instance, like the Flayed Men or the Blackguards, like they're gonna honestly, they're better than some Lannister units for Lannister. Roose Bolton is a commander, right? But then other factions like the Greyjoys or the Baratheons or at times the Starks or Targaryens, like there's no point to bringing them. So it's kind of like you get this weird. It's like Sal said. Your mileage is gonna vary so much with those guys. Um, it's just I don't know. I didn't think we were gonna be that divided on the neutral with our opinions. But hey, it's neutral, right? It's in the name. Like everybody's gonna be somewhat on a different spectrum, but somehow meet in the middle.
Yes, maybe in the future we'll see more. I know I've seen some previews of these golden companies, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh
There are
yes,
some crossbowmen. I don't know how they will.
elephants.
Yeah, I
Nah,
don't
I
know.
just want the elephants. I'm a Carthage nerd in real life history, and I just want the war elephants. That
That
Golden
would be
Company's
great.
got them. Yeah.
That would be great.
Anyhow, we've dwelled on the neutrals for a lot longer than I actually expected to. I thought that one was gonna go by quick. But now
Oops.
on to the Night's Watch.
So go. What questions have you got for Night's Watch?
I mean, just give us a rundown. Like they were the top dogs there for a while, but it looks like they're kind of
They
dying
were
down.
top dog. They're very well rounded in terms of everything that they have access to. They are a lot like Baratheons are now in that they are reliable. You have decent, you have good to you have really good to decent armor, really good to decent morale, several different abilities. I've watched the Sworn Brothers just make chumps of the dragons with the Night's Watch captain, but using it in a range sense where I'm standing 12 inches away from you and plugging you with at least 2 shots plus possible others from other sources. And it's just like, okay,
They did
there's the
nerf
game.
that. They did actually,
Yes,
since we played, nerf that. So I think that's why we're
they
seeing the
did.
Night's Watch go down the list in terms of ranking because, like, I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty broken. That's why they did the emergency patch that they did on it because, like, I don't know how unless I don't know. I don't know if there was any combating it before they changed it. I don't think there's anything in the game, and I think that's why they were winning
Well, and I
that can
think that's
contend with
why they
that.
were just because they weren't like before they had that update, they weren't just at the top. Like it wasn't like they were just
Yeah,
inking
it
it
wasn't even
out just
close.
above, Targs or somebody else. No, they were hands above in terms of how many tournaments were being won with Night's Watch. And I know that they nerfed him, but honestly,
They're still pretty good.
no. I think I'm happy with my choice of kind of leaving the Night's Watch. Not to make anybody mad. I wanted them for the fluff. I love the whole concept of the Night's Watch. They're loyal to no one but themselves. And they're there to protect everybody. And so I don't know, call me a good guy for it, but I really like that. Outside of that, though, my next favorite house is Baratheon.
Here he goes again.
They're not good guys, though, Andrew. They're like the Foreign Legion. They're made up with criminals. They used to be the good guys. Think of it like the Crusades. When it started, it was no, listen, it was, and this
Right,
is lore
yeah.
from the books. The second born sons, they were never going to take over their father's property, so they had to go, and they wanted to go protect. They were the shield that protected the realms of men. But hard times creates hard men create soft times. Ipso facto, at some point, the rich kids started sticking around and staying home and living off mom and dad, and the Night's Watch had to go start pulling people out of prisons in order to man their walls. So they're
Right.
not the good guys anymore. They are forced labor.
Yes. Yes, you're not
Conscripts, I
wrong.
think it's called.
My favorite unit was honestly the Ranger Hunters. They're not even like one of the better units to take for the Night's Watch. I just like how versatile they were. They had great models. They looked great. And I just like the whole concept of them. So, but yeah, that's my take on Night's Watch.
We're almost through the list anyway. So we got 2 more. Dylan, Starks.
Yeah. All right. So the Starks, I feel like they are, not as much so as the Greyjoys would they come in and hit hard. They're come in, hit hard, and then keep hitting hard. Like they're the group like do what the Greyjoys do almost, but better because they have good defenses. In my opinion.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd say that they're both factions are mid tier, but I would say that Starks, on average, feel a little more reliable.
Well, where the only thing they struggle with is, now you can call me an idiot for this if you completely disagree, but I feel like they're lacking in the NCUs.
I agree. No, I agree. I completely agree with that assessment. They have some of the stronger units.
They have the worst NCU in the game. Here's something else I'm going to say about the Starks. I wouldn't say get better, but they get better in a way as they continue getting like less units.
Oh, they totally do. Yeah, just about every single one of their core units, the Berserkers, She-Bears, the Sworn Swords, or whatever.
Not even just them. And I feel like here's a hot take I have for you. I feel like the best Stark units aren't actually the Starks; it's the other Northern families.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yes,
that's true.
yeah, I agree with you.
Either the Tully Sworn Shields or Eddard's Honored Guard are the best Stark units. But the problem with, I have to say the Tullys, because with Eddard's Honored Guard, you have to use Eddard as your commander.
My thing with the Starks is that their cool units aren't the ones you can win with.
Yeah, and I feel like Starks. I think the way we've all talked about them, at least from what I've seen, represents them pretty well. I've played against them twice. Not against you, Dylan, but against one of our other buddies that plays with us, Jake. They just, to me, they feel like one of the more balanced factions in the game, and I think they sit there in the ASOIAF stats, like right in the middle, and I think that's fair.
They're mid tier because they're not bad, but they're not like hands down bad.
I don't know.
Everyone else.
In our gaming group, I think that they would probably stand a good chance against the Lannisters.
I agree.
I think they're balanced enough.
I want to do that game.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so, because especially I'm just looking through some of their abilities. It looks like some of those abilities, they are precisely to counteract the Lannister supremacy, for example.
Yes.
So have we talked about your favorite unit?
I guess my favorite unit would have to be the Tully Sworn Shields, just because in our last game, I witnessed them take 16 points of models and lost one guy.
So cool. Targaryens are next, John, and those were your baby. Those are the ones you started the game with.
I started the game with high hopes, or started my collection rather with high hopes. I got to a point where I was about ready to get rid of them. I started to like them again, then I absolutely loathed them, and then now I really respect them, and actually they're one of my favorites to play. I think what the hump that I had to get over, and I think it's true for every Targaryen player, unless you're a nerd that just uses dragons, and that's something I'll get into, is that they're so... Every other faction in the game, whether it's good or not, okay, that's a different story, whether it's a good thing or not, has a very clear what they want you to do, right? Like, Greyjoys, you hit stuff. Starks, you hit stuff. Free folk, you swarm stuff. Lannister, you sustain, right? Like, everything's got a direction. But Targaryens are just like, all right, here's a buffet. It's like going to Shoney's. No, that's a bad example. Nobody likes Shoney's. It's like going to...
Corral.
Yeah, Golden Corral. And, like, you've just got all of this good food in front of you, and it's all good on its own, but then you start making a plate, and depending on what you put on your plate, you could ruin the food.
Or you notice the big fat redneck that's got his hands in the chocolate fountain.
Yeah, it's like you're building this plate, and it's like, ooh, I want shrimp. I want steak. I want macaroni and cheese, and then seafood salad. And then you put it all together, and then you're sick from eating it because it's like none of it goes together. Yeah. So it took me forever to figure out what I wanted to do. It took me forever to figure out what works, because they work differently than any other faction in the game in so many different ways. For one, their commanders get 4 cards instead of 3, but you replace one of your tactics deck, which changes the game a lot more than you would think. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around sometimes. They have so many units. Some of them work together, some of them don't. Some of them work with these cards and attachments, some of them do, some of them don't. The only list for Targaryens I can say for a fact that you're going to be competitive with against most other factions in any game mode is the dragons. Okay, that's the reason Targaryens are on top right now. They're really good. You bring 3 dragons and mother dragons, and you just wreck face. Doesn't really matter what your 4th unit is. And they're cool, but like you were saying about the Starks, Mikey, like they're just boring to me. If I wanted to just play dragons, I'd make a faction. I'd petition they make a faction called Dragons, like Daenerys's babies or something. I don't know. What were you saying?
Oh, me? I was saying, yeah. Like, that's the only reason why I continue to play Free Folk. No matter how much they stomach punch me every game I put them on the table, I don't find any of their models are just cool to me. I love looking out at the table and seeing the ragtag group on the table, you know?
Yeah, and Targaryens kind of play that way in a way, except instead of ragtag group, it's more like elite group of different sources.
Yeah.
And like the Unsullied, man, they look so cool. They have some really good rules. I don't think when you build, that's the thing about Targaryens. If you try to build a cohesive force, like say you go Unsullied and then you bring, either Daenerys or like the Grey Worm or Barristan as your commander, and who you bring as your commander makes a huge difference with the Targaryens. They're good. I think the Targaryens are good no matter what you bring, but you're hurting yourself sometimes, especially depending on your opponent with what you do bring. Like, it's not as straightforward as just they do what they do. I know I've said that like 20 times. I'm trying to find a good way to put it. Like, the Unsullied, have a completely different playstyle that isn't necessarily conducive to the Targaryen tactics deck, right? Because most of the tactics deck is meant for dragons and cavalry. So when you start bringing infantry, you're losing the tactics deck in favor of really strong unit abilities. Whereas on the the converse side, you bring all cavalry, for instance, like Khal Drogo and his Dothraki, and you start gaining really good synergy at the expense of the units becoming weaker. You know what I mean? So, it's really, I think Targaryen is a great faction for anybody because it's a Build-A-Bear faction, but it's not that easy to get a grip on. And again, unless you're playing dragons. As far as their bread and butter, again, it depends on how you build. I would say there's 3 units, depending on what you're bringing, that are bread and butter. The Stormcrow Archers, because they actually don't count as neutrals. They count as Targaryens, so they don't go against your points limit. The Stormcrows do. Stormcrow Archers and Stormcrows in general, really solid, cheap spam option. Unsullied, if you're going to go infantry, Unsullied Pikemen, I prefer them to the Swordmasters. I think they're more reliable. And then if you're going to go cavalry, I gotta say Khal Drogo's Blood Riders specifically. And normally the bread and butter units are as we've discussed, the 5-point, your stock guys. But ever since the release of the Blood Riders, they're just, you can only bring one, but they're so good, like unbelievably good, especially because Khal Drogo's in there, and like he's got his duelist, expert duelist, and then his ability that kind of like dampens the impact of morale or a panic test on the unit. And then you throw in all the stuff the Blood Riders get, and yeah, it's an 8-point unit, but man, an 8-point unit that absolutely wrecks like a wrecking ball. Salvo can attest to that.
Yeah.
But I would say that's my favorite unit in the army now. It would have been the Unsullied before, but Khal Drogo's Blood Riders, and Khal Drogo as a commander, I think also is one of the more straightforward options, but he's one of the more... I think you can have a good chance at just about any scenario playing Dothraki with Khal Drogo because they're just so versatile. They've got movement like no other faction in the game, and as long as you can manage to outmaneuver your opponent, you will give them a good game, regardless of whether the fact Dothraki are a little weak on the taking hits side. Past that, it's hard to talk about them because it just varies so wildly depending on who your commander is, what units. I haven't had a time or the amount of games to just experiment with every combo possible with them because they just have access to so much. So I couldn't say basically I can't say anything is great or horrible except the dragons. We know the dragons are good. They are killable. Certain factions, certain units can kill them, but man, they're at the top right now. I don't see any winning tournament list without at least one dragon in them.
I gotta say a couple of things. First, the with new upcoming changes to the game, we know that commanders will now score the extra points for objectives.
Yes.
So this means that we're gonna see more commanders being into the fray, and this favors people like, for example, Khal Drogo.
Correct.
Because yeah, honestly, it would be a waste to have such a unit as a Blood Rider just sitting on an objective.
That's the one
Second,
drawback they had now, I would say.
yes, and secondly, I gotta say this: I played with them a couple of times only, and I played only the Khal Drogo mostly cavalry unit, cavalry army. I gotta say, I love the fact that you can dictate where to take the opponent's attention because you decide. You can change your mind. I changed my mind after deployment, and I was able to redeploy myself in 2 turns, basically.
Yes.
You can't do that with any other army, as far as I'm aware.
No.
At least not that easily.
No. That's the linchpin of, again, and it depends on what you take, but if you bring cavalry, which I think is like what people think of, I mean, it's the starter box for the faction, that's their whole thing. It's really not that they're that killy or that they do anything super special that no one else does, because honestly, they're kind of vanilla compared to some other units, but it's that movement. And then you combine those with the NCUs
Yes.
and the tactics cards, and like, you just, like Savo said, you don't get to pick when you fight them, which makes them really deadly, because in this game, choosing when and how you do stuff is very important. So not getting to pick for the most part, when you get to engage them, like, can really mess someone's game plan up.
Yes, but it requires, I believe, more skill, because again, playing as the Lannisters, yes, my skill is mostly about managing the decks and my cards. But when it comes to the Targaryens, the skill is into managing the board. Like, where do I position myself? Trying to be always in the proactive, offensive mode. Always having the opponent to decide if they want to face you on the side, on the rear, because you have that upper hand. You can honestly, at every turn, decide, I'm going to charge you on the side this turn, or I want to wait, I will charge you in the rear. So you have that upper hand, but with that upper hand, it comes more responsibilities, because now you dictate, and therefore you got to know what you're doing. In a way, you should know the opponent's army a bit more, because then it's almost like a surgeon. You need to know where to attack in the weakest point to create a gap maybe in their defenses and capitalize from there.
I agree, and that was my frustration with them because that was the first faction I picked up when we were all picking up, our starter boxes, was the Targaryen, and that was my frustration. I used to think they were bad, and I got that perception because I didn't know what to do with them. It's kind of like being handed Excalibur and then saying, "Okay, go slay the dragon,"
Yeah.
But now that I've, played every faction in the game just about, I think I have played every faction in the game now, against them, I mean. And now that I kind of know how they work a little better, I do really see them as a completely solid faction. And I think anybody can have fun with them because you can build them however you want. It
Yes.
really is the Lego faction of the game. But that, like you said, that comes with responsibilities. Like, you're not going to be a new player learning and just come out the gate winning games with them. But once you figure out how they work, once you figure out how your opponents work, then you start to have really good, solid games. I don't see how you could have a bad game with them unless your dice just weren't with you.
Well, that Mikey used to say, the dice tell their story.
That's Tyler. Tyler says that. I give him credit.
Okay.
You don't want to hear what I say about dice.
Okay.
So, with all that said, I mean, I'll give you guys, if anyone wants to weigh in on them. I know I'm, the one that's played them the most. Does anybody have anything else to say about these, interesting dragony themed cavalry boys?
I think
like
the models
the
are
Zorths.
cool.
And they should be with you. They shouldn't be with the neutrals. The Zorses should be with the Targaryens.
Listen, Zor's supremacy, I'm telling you, man. I want those guys to be good so bad.
Yeah, I think the models have such a good charm, especially the Unsullied.
Oh man, the Unsullied, like, I mean, come on. I had to paint them like Spartans from the movie 300. I mean, are you kidding me? I think they're inspired
Yeah.
by Greece. I really don't even
Oh,
think they're inspired by or excuse me, by Carthage. I don't even think. I think they're more North African themed than Greek themed, but still. I mean, come on.
they look
Leonidas.
cool. Yes.
Yeah, Grey Worm is Leonidas without balls.
Absolutely.
um. Anyhow, this has turned into an hour and 30-minute monstrosity. That I may or may not cut down because I feel like we've chewed through a lot of good content here. I think for anybody that's interested in the subject, we took a lot of hot takes that you just don't hear anywhere else.
Well, something that we haven't mentioned it, and probably we should have put this at the beginning of this whole thing. I gotta say, the reason why this game has really taken its place among us is because I believe it has three big elements. First, it is relatively cheap when you compare with other games on this scale.
Probably the cheapest at this scale, honestly.
It's probably and then the rules per se are probably what 18 pages, 16
If
pages.
if you count the fact most of those are just like 2 pages, take up a whole spread for a graphic, like maybe 10.
Yes. And the third element is we can transport the minis and the terrains basically without efforts if you compare with other games like Lord of the Rings, for example. Yes, you lose the aesthetics of the 3D, and I do is not probably the best game for lovers of modeling and hobbyists.
Not
but
at all.
For the broad spectrum of gamers, I believe it is an excellent. So again, transportability, it's very, very cheap, so it's affordable, and it's easy to learn, hard to master.
Yeah, I agree with all those notes. I think that's what's captured me about it. I know we've had frustrations because the game does have balance issues. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter. But
Yes, yes.
it's just so easy to move around and then set up and play. Like, actually, we have a game. Me and Dylan are going to get a game in, like, in a few minutes after we end this podcast here, this recording session. And I mean, like, it takes maybe 15 minutes to set the game up. Like, and that's if you're being slow. In a tournament setting where you're forced to, get things rolling, you could have this game up and running in under 5 minutes. I would say under 5 minutes. You can have a table set up, models deployed, ready to go, and I mean, if you can tell me another game you can do that in, another miniatures game, then like I'll concede my point, but I don't think you can.
Not on this scale.
So yeah, that's A Song of Ice and Fire. That's TriStar's take on literally every faction in the game. Some got a little more word service than others, but I think we did a pretty good job covering them all.
I agree.
So, with all that said, guys, we enjoy you listening as always. Sorry about the inconsistency in content recently. I'll take a chance to say it on here so we're not clogging the regular videos up with it. We have been plagued by schedule issues, health issues, job issues,
everything.
Yeah, and we're working to get stuff out, and we really appreciate the continued support. If we don't do it for any other reason than because you guys are just so awesome, and we enjoy doing it. But I mean, really, honestly, we say it all the time, but come on, guys, you can vouch for me. What do? We read comments and talk about it, and it's just a good time. So
yeah, please
absolutely.
keep it coming. Comments, questions. We enjoy interacting.
Of course. So all of that said, I'll finally shut my big mouth. Whether you play A Song of Ice and Fire or not in life.
You want this sound?
Just remember, you end.
Don't roll a 1.
Don't roll a 1.
Yes, absolutely.
It's getting dicey. Dicey.